From the city of broad shoulders, this is Chicago Unscripted with CBS News Chicago's Joe Donlan.
Michael, greetings from Chicago. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Joe. Glad to be here.
This is kind of your off season, isn't it? You're not touring now.
That's right. It's a little early in the morning for me, too.
You're in L.A., I take it, right? So it's 8:30 there, right?
Yeah, I'm in Santa Barbara, L.A. area, yeah.
That's early for you, 8:30?
Well, not really. For some reason this morning it was. I usually get up and I'm out of the house by 7, I do a little thing in the morning with some friends and breakfast usually afterwards. But so this morning I slept in because I worked late in here last night and thought, well, I better get some sleep so I have my wits about me. So far that hasn't proven to be a thing.
Well, there's still time. What do you do when you're home and not on the road? What do you like to do?
I try to make myself stay somewhat vigilant with, getting into the studio and I do sessions when I'm home still a bit. Anything to kind of keep singing because, I'm one of those kind of guys with the kind of voice that if I don't sing for a year, I'm not coming back. It's just, I have to do it to keep it, and so and that comes in varying grades of performance. So I sometimes I scare myself, and my memory's not what it used to be either, as I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. If we're off for 2 weeks, we start looking at each other at rehearsal, like, what how's this song go?
Well, it's not like you're going to forget the words to, it keeps you running, right?
It's quite possible.
Well, the timing works out for this conversation because you gear up again for the summer tour and you start, I noticed, right here in Tinley Park with the Doobie Brothers on June 13th.
That's right. Looking forward to it. It's going to be fun to go out again this summer and with Carlos Santana. I mean, we're more amazed than anyone, at the fact that we're still doing this. And,
right.
And the audiences still show up and, at our age, you start to actually think you recognize people in the audience.
Well, I had Lee Loughnane on from Chicago, and it's another example, the Doobie Brothers, Chicago, and it actually brings up an interesting point. I think the 70s and 80s, just special decades for music, and you can tell just by how it's endured. I mean, look at you guys are still not only popular, but relevant. Do you think today's music will hold up like our generation's music, or am I just being nostalgic?
Oh, I think it will. I think in the same way that our parents wondered if we would ever be listening to half the stuff we were listening to by the time we were 30, which we did, and then. And we still are, I think there's some wonderful music out there these days, some really brilliant young artists that, it's funny. I when I get the chance to, I'm always amazed working with people like, Thundercat or whoever, the guys, Jacob Collier. And I realize these guys are doing it so much better than we did when we were in the saddle, and Charlie Puth, just really brilliant musicians, and they do what they do well with so much more skill than we had, back then. We were just trying to imitate people with skill,
right?
And
wow.
These guys are the real deal, some of them. So I think they'll be around for their whole lives as long as they choose to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, you released a new album last summer with the Doobie Brothers, Walk This Road, and the first cut features a Chicago legend in Mavis Staples. How did that come to be?
Well, I had met Mavis a few years back at an event at Berkeley College in Boston, and we performed together there, and we, always remained friends over the years. She was always sweet enough to ask me to come and do events with her, for her birthdays and stuff like that. And she's just such a tour de force, just an amazing force of nature. She's the last thing we did together at live was her birthday party, and around 1 a.m, she was the only one still ready to go. Everybody else was, kind of, was saying goodbye and saying their good nights and, calling the babysitters to see if they were still awake. And she was just, thanking everyone, being very gracious as she was. But she performed that night, and as she always does, knocked it out of the park.
Yeah.
So when we did that song, I thought, well, what better, because the Staple Singers, that was their mission, seemingly, music, was to pose the question to us. How can we be accountable as human beings, as a humanity? How can we learn to treat each other better? How can we do the next right thing? And Pop Staples made that his life's work as a musician, as a composer, and with his daughters, they and son, they did an amazing job of keeping the message alive, keeping the flame of freedom burning, so that we could all see it, So when we did this song, it started off where John Shanks had the idea to write a song about the band getting back together, but it became much more right away as we started to write it. We thought, well, this is really kind of a universal thing of, we're all walking this road together. We all live on this little blue planet, and we just can't seem to learn how to get along, stop killing each other. And maybe we need to do that. And then maybe we need to call Mavis Staples because nobody says it better than her, and she did, she left the rest of us in the dust on the track. So we were glad to have her on board for that one.
All right, your career has intersected with Chicago many times. If I mention the city of Chicago to you, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
See, the first thing that comes to mind would be the time we played it as the Doobie Brothers. Probably it was early '80s.
Chicago Fest, maybe Navy Pier.
It was Chicago Fest, Navy Pier, and looking out at the audience, we had decided that this was going to be our last tour. I don't know if we'd come public with it yet, but we as a band decided we weren't going to do it anymore. And I remember looking out at that crowd and fists pumping, and they just were with us. It had to be 60,000 people or something, and thinking to myself, so we're just going to walk away from this? I mean, we have this wonderful connection with an audience that we look forward to playing for every year. It's become our life's mission just to get on the plane and go and do this. And we've been so fortunate as a band. How do you walk away from something like this? But we had decided to at that point, and Pat had done a solo record already, and I had done a solo record. And I remember that night. Another thing I remember that night was we had worked up one song from his solo record with the band and one from my solo record with the band, and decided we were going to play them at Chicago Fest. And the band was so gracious to do that, and we were ending on good terms. We just decided we had done it. We thought we were tired.
No,
we don't know what tired. We didn't know what tired was. But anyway, so we played my song first, I think, and it was "Keep Forgetting." And the band played it brilliantly, and the crowd, up until that moment, it was like fists pumping and perfect time with the band, and we had them, and it was we did Keep Forgetting. It was kind of like, what is this, and it was a polite applause, but you could tell it was like, what was that, and then Pat came up and did his brand new song, and right away the fists are pumping. And they're right back into sync with the band. And I thought, that's not good.
Well, it was good in the end. I mean, that was
it was good in the end,
hits,
yes.
right? Yeah.
But I remember having some real consternation in my the rest of the show. That's all I could think about. But we had a great time that night, and it made it really. It brought the reality of us packing it up and separating, going our separate ways. It brought a new reality to it that up to that point, I don't think any of us had considered,
Yeah. I was watching a YouTube video of It Keeps You Running. It's such a great video and track. And I looked at the details, and it was recorded for Soundstage as I looked at it. And I'm like, that was a show on WTTW back in the day. And I think your manager, Joel, told me you guys might have done the first episode of that show, he thought anyway, but and I think that was 77, and you guys were hitting on all cylinders.
I think that we were one of the in the first episode of Soundstage, and yeah, it was a great show and remained a great show all these years. It's I just recently did it, and I say recently, but probably it's got to be 5 years ago now. And it was fun to be on that stage, again, and it's a great crew, and they do a great job. There's not that many, as you know, shows like that, live music that still exist. So I look back at some of the midnight specials and those shows, and I realize that those were really wonderful performances by a lot of artists that. And I think Soundstage has the same kind of archive of really great performances by people that you're not going to see anywhere else,
Right?
Because they are alive,
Exactly. Yeah. There's another incident you write about in the book about Illinois State Troopers having to break up a fight at one of your shows.
Oh, when I was very young at that,
yeah. We're going to go back here a little bit.
yeah. This was probably 65, 66, something like that. And it was my first band. Mike
and the Majestics, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know how the mic came about or how I got but that was, the kibosh was put on that shortly after that. And that was just the Majestics. But at this point in time, it was Mike and the Majestics. We played the Benel Coliseum for what if I remember correctly, it was like a farmers agricultural convention of some kind, dinner, and so it's really a bunch of good old Midwest salt of the earth farmers and their wives in this place. And back then people smoked incessantly, so in this huge coliseum you could see the first row of tables, and then it just went into a fog all the way to the back of the building, and we're up there playing and singing, and we were terrible probably, and right in the middle of our set, I started to hear some racket. It sounded like things getting knocked over, but it was so far back into the cigarette smoke, I couldn't see what was going on. And all of a sudden, it got a little closer, and I realized those are like folding chairs collapsing, and people screaming, and tables being upended, and it got closer. And pretty soon, these the guy that was the MC. Came up on stage with us to get out of the fray, and this fight ensued with all these farmers and their wives, and it was bedlam. And they actually had to call the state troopers, came in and broke it up, called the whole thing off, and we were outside. We got our gear out of there, which wasn't much, but. And sitting on the steps waiting for my dad to pick us up, because we had gotten off early, obviously. And, but it was just one of those first experiences where I just go, well, how does that happen? Where, a bunch of 60, 70-year-old farmers get into a fist fight,
Reminds me of that scene from the Blues Brothers, wasn't it? Where they're in the bar and they have a cage in front of them to block all the bottles people are throwing.
Oh yeah, I never played one of those places, but this probably came the closest to it,
Yeah, you played for a while early on too in Champaign-Urbana, right?
I did for many years. Well, I say many years. It all seemed like many years back then, but we used to play at the Chances Are up there and Bonaparte's Retreat, and that was a great town for a band to play. It was a college town with an ample supply of watering holes that were popular. And I think that's where the whole idea of bands breaking by playing college towns in the Midwest, a lot of the bands that you heard later, REO, Speedwagon, any number of the groups.
Probably Styx, I would imagine.
Yeah, Hootie and the Blowfish, all those bands started pretty much the same way as we did back then, which was playing at these big, old distilleries or barns that were converted into clubs. And when we started playing there, they actually they had just discontinued the Go-Go Girls. So that's goes to show you how far back it was when we played there.
Well, let's go back a little farther because you and I have something in common, and that is that we both grew up in Ferguson, Missouri. And in fact, based on the book, I think I could have hit a golf ball from my house to yours. I grew up off of Woodstock, and you mentioned North Hills Dairy. Man, we used to live there. That's just, it brought back all these memories for me. And the last time I looked up my childhood home on Zillow, it was worth $100,000 today.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, humble beginnings for sure, Michael.
Yeah, no, it was. We didn't know that then, but and it's still a great town. I still love going back there. It's what it was then to me now. My house certainly looks a lot better than it did when we lived in it. We were that family in the neighborhood, where the screen door was laying on its side next to the front door, and the lawn was bare, and the shrubs were dead, but and the porch was falling off the back of the house. But I still love going back there. I've fantasized once or twice about living back there again, and I think one of the reasons that the home values, I don't know what's going on in Ferguson, but I think a lot of it is we had some natural disaster problems back in that area. When we were growing up, we weren't aware of them then, but that North County St. Louis area was
exactly
ground zero for processing plutonium.
Yep. Yeah.
The nuclear arsenal. So I think that has a lot to do with, and there's been a lot of kids that kind of grew up more in the 70s that had some serious health problems from that.
Right. There's a fund they just started, as I understand it, that's paying people back who've gotten sick or gotten cancer as a result of some of that. But I've been blown away, Michael, in researching for this conversation, just how much you accomplished at such an early age. I mean, at 15, you were essentially the lead singer of a legit band, right? I mean, you used to play at Castaways with some amazing bands, the Allman Brothers, Muddy Waters, B.B. King, Chuck Berry, who's a St. Louis staple, of course. The people you were around at a young age, when you look back at that, it's just staggering.
Well, it amazes me that the Castaway was in Ferguson, Missouri, of all places, because it's really kind of a club of in later years, it became kind of renowned for those very bands you mentioned playing there. And we were the house band. Chuck Sabatino and I were the youngest guys in a band called Jerry J and the Sheratons. We were the house band. So we backed up a lot of people that came through town, Muddy Waters being one of them, Chuck Berry. Ike played there. The Allman Brothers played there. And, we didn't realize it then. It was just that thing that we kind of gravitated to. But Ferguson had quite a music scene in its day. There's guys that I knew back then that I still see today, I still work with today from time to time. Bill Luzzi, who was also in Jerry J and the Sheratons. But I marvel when I think back at how much it didn't have so much to do with what I accomplished as just being in the right place at the right time. And of all places, that was Ferguson, Missouri, and then of course, we were traveling back then to go to the Club Imperial to play. That was like a almost out of town gig,
Right. I'm going to show you a picture I found, and I'm assuming you're going to know what this is. I'm not quite sure, but I hate to spring this on you, but
Oh yeah, that's Jerry J and the Sheratons and our cardigan sweaters and high collar.
Yeah,
we bought our clothes at Joe's Clothes, which was I think it was in Wellston or someplace where it was like the only place that performers in St. Louis bought their clothes because they had kind of hip stuff,
Okay.
Patent leather shoes, things like that,
And the Dickies.
Dickies, yeah, sure. And that was Chuck Sabatino and Jerry Schulte, the band leader, Jerry J, in the picture with me there.
When I look back at all you've done, you opened for the Doors at one point, didn't you? We Battle?
Did. Yeah,
Who were you with at that point?
But we were in the Sheratons,
Okay.
And I think I was probably 15, maybe 14, 15.
And you're opening for the Doors.
We won a Battles of the Bands, a Vox Battle of the Bands, and that was a national contest. And I don't know if you remember Northland Music.
Oh, yeah.
Irv Satanowski, was a wonderful guy. Just he was so good to all the local bands, and he'd sell stuff sometimes at less than his cost. I mean, he was just that kind of guy to support the young bands coming up in St. Louis area because, and I think he was a smart businessman because he knew that, down the road as these bands become more professional, they're going to come to him, But he sponsored us in this contest and we won. And he went to New York with us actually too. And our managers and some of the guys' wives came. And we first time most of us ever got on a jet airplane, and we went to, and our manager made us dress for the flight. So 13 of us got on the plane, all dressed alike, and I think the people on the plane thought it was some kind of cult, we're debating on whether to get off or not, But we went to, we dressed alike for everything, When we loaded in for gigs, we had to wear bowling shirts with our names over the pocket and the band name on the back, But so we went up there. We played at what was it? Big venue outside of New York, Forest Hills Stadium,
Okay.
and we opened for Simon and Garfunkel and the Doors. And it was the three bands: one from California, one from the East Coast, and us from the Midwest. And of course, when we played, it was still daylight, and most people were just looking for their seats. And and then the other two bands, when they played, it actually had gotten dark and the lights came on. So we felt that, our manager felt it was we had played at a disadvantage. But
You'd been slighted.
But we had a great time, and it was life changing in a lot of ways on a personal level for me, because I remember meeting a guy there that really kind of hit me to the whole idea of what was the importance of writing your own music, and writing songs and having your own copyrights, and getting into the game that way, because then you have an annuity, you have something that's worth something, and will always be worth something. And I always look back at that conversation and think, man, that was very timely for me. It'd be a long time before I could write a decent song, but I started writing songs immediately, after that conversation.
Let's jump forward a little bit. You're, I think, 19. You're in LA and you're at a party, as I understand it. Toto was there, and that somehow led you to Steely Dan, and you're 19?
Well, yeah. I by then I was playing, I had kind of, I don't know. I was still playing sessions when I could get them, and but I kind of just started to venture out to play clubs because I sensed that that's where other musicians I might want to meet were, and so we played clubs. I was dating a girl at the time, on and off, but she was a great bass player, singer, and we did a lot of club gigs around San Fernando Valley and Orange County together, and Hollywood. And she was that person that I would never be, which is, she would get the gigs and she would talk to the club owners and she would make sure we had the gear and, a PA and all stuff like that. And I was the guy that the day of the gig was calling everybody I knew to see if I could borrow an amp, so I was always riding on the coattails of someone and typically her at the time. But she was always great at coming up with gigs, and we would play these gigs. And this one was a rap party at Universal Studios for the TV show Emergency. I remember.
Oh, yeah.
If you remember that show.
I do.
So like a week out from the gig, I don't have a band. I have no idea where I'm going to get any gear. And I'm sitting in my apartment, stressed out with this other friend of mine, the only guy I've gotten so far, a sax player. And we're just sitting there, smoking a lot of pot, and I'm in a terrible mood. Thinking she's going to kill me, And he says, "Listen," I goes, "I'll tell you what. My brother is friends with these guys. They're doing the Steely Dan album right now, and they're session cats. But they would love to come down and play." And I said, "Well, I can't pay these guys the kind of money because they do it for nothing because they just like to get out and play. They're stuck in the studio all day long." And so far, he goes, "I think they've been working 10 to 6, and they might want to do it." And I wouldn't be surprised. I said, "Well, God, that would be too good to be true, And it was great fun, And I remember Jeff talking that night. We would go out back outside the building and for a cigarette break, and he was saying, he was talking about doing the Steely Dan album, and had some funny stories about it, and I remember sitting there thinking, wow, how lucky this guy, he's younger than me. He's playing on a Steely Dan record, my favorite band at the time, About a year later, I came by my girlfriend's apartment, and she says, Jeff Porcaro called me. She knew everybody, so they knew how to get a hold of her. And she said, he's trying to get a hold of you. He gave me his number, wants you to call him. I said, oh, okay. And, being me, I'm like, oh gosh, Jeff Porcaro, wow, and I made the phone call, and he says, what are you doing? And he goes, that tour I was talking about, we were going to go out and do when we were recording Pretzel Logic. This was like a year ago. Because we're finally actually doing it. We're rehearsing down at Modern Music right now. And I mentioned you to Donald and Walter that maybe you could play some keyboards and sing some backgrounds, on the tour, because they're not going to use the girls this tour, And I said, well, gosh, yeah. I said, he goes, would you be up for audition? I said, sure. When are you talking about? He goes, like right now. I wound up touring the world really with Steely Dan for about a year, and then the assholes broke up.
Yeah, but it started a relationship that lasted a long time with Donald Fagen. Is there a way for
absolutely.
you to talk about how much he impacted your career?
So much. Jeff Porcaro for sure, and Jeff Baxter and Donald and Walter. Gave me opportunities that I never dreamed of having, and I'll be forever grateful to those guys, and to, what always struck me was like, later on when we were in our late 60s, taking the stage together for this or that, playing, I toured with Steely Dan with my band, for a while. We played a tour together, and every time we got on stage, I would think, did any of us ever think for a minute back then that in our 60s we'd still be on stage together? I would have never bet on that, and oddly enough, at that, even in my late 60s, when I would sit in with Steely Dan at the end of the show, I would keep my eye on Donald, because that's what I did when I was like 19 and I was in a band, and just to see if I was getting canned in this moment, Every once in a while, he was very subtle, he'd play, but if I did something wrong or tried something that he didn't like or something, he would just kind of look over at me like, we're not going to do that again, are we?
Yeah.
And I think I'm being fired right now,
Yeah. So you're still trying to get the audition and the gig.
Yeah. No, the inner child in me came out in my late 60s. Just, every time he glanced at me, I'd pucker up,
Yeah. Let's talk about the book for a minute, Michael. What a Fool Believes. You talk a lot about your relationship. You've touched on it a little bit here with your dad. In fact, your first appearance was at age 5 with your dad in a bar. And you do spend a lot of time talking about your relationship with your dad. You admired him for his confidence, but that wasn't something you had. And you wanted to impress him desperately.
I'll show you a picture. This is my dad in the Marine Corps in the Pacific, singing with the Bob Crosby and the Bobcats Orchestra. And as the story goes, I think he maybe had eyes to, he had a beautiful voice and he remained a singer his whole life. That's how I got into, I would traipse along with him to different saloons in the St. Louis area. While he sang with his favorite piano players in these saloons. And back then, they didn't have jukeboxes in the saloons yet. Every corner saloon that was, frequented enough had a piano player, and they were usually great piano players.
Mm-hmm.
My dad would go and sing with this one woman, Ida Burns, but he came out of there. That particular experience right there was kind of hopeful for him, because I think some exchanges were made that hey, we'll talk when we all get through this, and
mm-hmm.
blah 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 blah, and maybe you come down and audition for the band, but it never happened, and he decided he needed to get a job and go to work as a streetcar driver in St. Louis. And because he was thinking about raising a family at that point,
Mm-hmm.
So he gave up his dreams, but I think they always kind of remained for him. And the thing we shared in common were our love of what we thought were great songs and those songwriters and those voices that sang those songs and made them their own, like the Sinatras, Nat Cole, Ray Charles, those are our favorites. And I still remember riding around in his car, the first decent car we got was a Ford Fairlane. It was had one of those big Delco radios, tube radios in it, and everything sounded so great, even though it was mono. But we would listen to every time Ray Charles came on, we'd crank it, or Nat Cole or Frank Sinatra, and it was like the whole world filled up with their voice, and that song, those were just really wonderful memories for me. And I think in the back of my mind, my whole pursuit of this I was just determined as hell to make a go of it and live out my dad's dream, and I thought by way of that, I would win his, attention and admiration, and because my dad was a Marine coming out of the Pacific World War II. He had a lot of issues,
Mm-hmm.
One of them, the least of which was he had to be moving all the time.
Mm-hmm.
He was always packing us in the car to go somewhere, on some car trip, and but he loved being a streetcar driver for that reason. He was moving, and when he was moving, he felt okay. Sitting in four walls drove him absolutely insane, and that took its toll on him and my mom. And so, and I tagged along with him a lot and saw him sing, and I saw the way people appreciated anyone who could get up and sing a song well for them, So that was embedded in me early on,
Yeah. The other thing you spend a lot of time talking about is your lack of confidence and your struggles with addiction. And there's a part where you say, I think when you're a prisoner of your perceived limitations, you fail to honestly and adequately come to terms with your past. That denial in time becomes a compounding element that can result in a lifetime of erratic behavior. All of it to hide your fear of not being enough, a hole no amount of drugs or alcohol would ever fill.
Yeah, I think so many of us, as I get older, I realize that trauma is a very common malady. I think when we go through it, we all think of it that we're unique somehow, that other people don't feel the way we feel, or don't have the fears or that feeling of being other than that. But everybody does have some issue that shapes them in a negative way that can become a positive asset of some kind later. It's up to us. It's incumbent on us to find our way with these things. For me, it was my relationship with my dad, because he left a lot when I was a kid, and I was the only boy, and I idolized the guy. I adored him. He was everything I wanted to be, and every time he walked out, I didn't know if I was going to see him again. And I struggled with that. And so as it was probably only normal that I would grow up thinking, am I not enough? I know, in family, you love each other more than anything. You would never leave each other, and that was really a struggle for me to understand. And it left me with some feelings of never being enough, but we all have those, I'm not unique in that respect, but I think what happens in the interim or in the long haul is we kind of operate in this imposter syndrome. To this day, I'm not really a keyboard player per se. Guys that really play piano well that I know, I can't do anything that they do. I play enough in a couple of keys to write a song. And every once in a while I'm forced to take a solo, and sweat bullets, but
You still feel like you have imposter syndrome, Mike?
oh yeah, very much so. And I thought the only reason I say that is it's gotten worse as I got older. I thought I'd take, 74, who gives a shit, But at 74, I find myself more than ever worrying about stuff that I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna become that keyboard player at 74. But
After all you've accomplished?
well, it's just that the guys I worked with were always much better than me, and I always wanted to be them, and I always was afraid that somebody any minute now everybody's going to know that I don't belong here, and
Oh, wow.
I'm going to get bounced, and then but that was just my nature, and I always had to be careful not to let that get the best of me, to remind. And oddly enough, it was things my dad said to me that I would remember. He would say, "Look, all you can do is your best, and you're not going to be the one that decides whether it's good or enough or not. All you could do is try, and then you've done all you can, And I remember things like that, that he would say to me. And when you walk in a room, not everybody's thinking about you. The way most of us believe, when the room goes silent, it's like they must have been talking about me,
Wow. Well, please tell me that you're going to look back on your career, Mike, and say, holy shit, what a ride this was, and what a success this was, and what an impact you've had on a generation and then some.
I do. I mean, don't get me wrong. I appreciate it so much. But I also realize how fortunate I was, I mean, so many random things, random moments, but for that moment of complete, like that one casual gig we played, and then Jeff Baxter calling me years later to come down to New Orleans and fill in for Tom for a while, with the Doobies, and what that led to. Donald, giving me the breaks he's given me, to go out and play with him and Boz. And, I just, what my dilemma is not messing those things that I should obviously be grateful for, make that gratitude list, because inside of that, I'll find some reason to screw it up, I'll find some reason to have an issue about it, and I'll forget that I'm so lucky just to be where I'm at right now in this moment, that I've never dreamed. When one of the moments I had, I think I wrote about it in the book, with getting to play with my idol, Ray Charles,
Sure.
and sing with him on a soundstage with a 40-piece orchestra, and all I could think of was like, and literally I thought this, Joe, it was like, my buddies in Ferguson that I started out playing with, if they knew how much I loved Ray Charles, and we used to play Ray Charles songs. I Don't Need No Doctor. We recorded a demo of that in Peoria, Illinois, somewhere years ago. But I remember all I could think of was, if they could see me now, what would they think? And I'm not. It's not like I'm not grateful for those moments, and I don't understand it any more than anybody else. But I appreciate it. When people come up to me and say, "Hey, I really loved your music," or whatever, and they tell me what they think the songs are about, it's usually not what I wrote about, but I always like their idea better. They'll say, your song about this and that, it really meant a lot to me, and I'll go, wow, I wish I had thought of it. That's what I was writing about, but that's become all the more precious to me with the years. I think I appreciate that more now than I ever did in the first years of having a successful run with the band and those things, because it seems all the more impossible to me now. I mean.
Yeah.
It's like I marvel at that now more than I did when I was a little bit younger and just too busy, swinging to the next tree.
How did you become the king of collaboration? You look back at all of the hits you had from from What a Fool Believes, with Kenny Loggins and Quincy Jones, Yamo Be There, and Patti LaBelle, On My Own, Christopher Cross, right? Like, you could go on and on and on. Nate Dogg and Warren G sampled, I keep forgetting. I mean, even just peripherally, and things that you were all part of became enormous.
I think for my part in it, staying active, and one reason I still do sessions now is I'm afraid of becoming, of stepping back just too far to miss an opportunity that might come up, And so many of my contemporaries are still making great music. I just did a session with Edgar Winter.
Oh yeah,
this last weekend, and he's this record he's doing is phenomenal. It's a Texas blues, a tribute to Texas blues and Texas artists, and I didn't, unbeknownst to me, Sly Stone was from Texas, and so we did Everyday People.
Sure.
Edgar and I, and it was just great fun. And and everything I heard, he's got a track on there with Billy Strings and a bunch of the Nashville guys, Jerry Douglas. And it's a bluegrass version of a blues tune he wrote called Texas Tilt. It was a blues shuffle, but the bluegrass guys took it, and it's just phenomenal.
Wow, is that recorded, or was that live?
It's recorded.
Yeah, so I can get that on Spotify or somewhere?
It's going to come out. They're in the process of finishing the record now, So the track we just did last Saturday. And so I think the record will be out coming up this year at some point.
What's it called?
I think the album is called, now don't quote me on this, but I think the album is called Texas Tilt.
Oh, I need to hear that. Just Edgar Winter takes me back, Mike, to, Frankenstein. Man, you remember that? Good grief. That was...
Well, and that's a very apropos song because he's still a monster, man. I mean,
is that right? Sings
and plays and he's just full of energy, and he hasn't lost a beat,
Okay, last question. The number one hits, the Grammys, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the collaborations, the bands... When you look back at all you've accomplished, Mike, what would you say you're most proud of?
For all of that, I would have to say I'm most proud of my kids and my wife, and I don't say that lightly. I think they have meant more to me fundamentally in my life than anything else, any success in the music industry or anything. And they have taught me to be a better person, and I think that's what I needed help with more than anything. I never thought of myself as a bad person, but I think I was a selfish person to a fault, and mostly motivated by fear. That I wasn't, you weren't going to accept me, or I wasn't going to get noticed, or that I don't even know if it was really so much that as I wasn't going to be valid in your eyes, or I wasn't going to contribute somehow, and that led me down a lot of roads that I regret, but sometimes it takes those regrets to really understand what you're after in terms of, we all like to say we want to be a better person, but what does that really mean, and sometimes we only really know what that means by way of looking at our mistakes and using them as strengths more than regrets and guilt, but just going, well, nobody knows more than I do what you shouldn't do, not to do, and maybe by way of that, I can learn to be a better person,
Yeah. Well, you dedicated the book to your wife, Amy, and your son, Dylan, and daughter, Scarlett, and you said, they will always be the best part of my life story. And I think that does say a lot, considering all you have accomplished professionally. I had a feeling you were going to go there, which is why I didn't prompt you on the family. And sure enough, there you are. Michael, again, what an honor to chat with you. What a career. So many of your songs transport us instantly to another place in time. I mean, we remember exactly where we were when those songs came out. And I think I speak for music fans around the world when I say thank you for all the great times and all the great music.
Joe, thank you. It's always great to meet a Fergusonite. A real pleasure.
Take care. We'll see you in Tinley Park in June.
All right, man. Thank you.
My thanks to Brian Griggs from Brian Griggs Productions as our audio engineer. I asked a few friends to help me out on the project. Chicago vibraphonist Thaddeus Tukes created the original theme music, and Bill Curtis lends his legendary voice to the introduction each episode. I'm Joe Donlin. I'll see you on CBS News Chicago. It's available everywhere on the CBS News app. And as always, I thank you for listening to Chicago Unscripted.